syndicated cartoonist Jerry Kraft. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. For close to 2 decades, syndicated cartoonist Jerry Kraft has made people laugh as he talked about life through the eyes of an African-American family. His Mama's Boys cartoon deals with everyday life, culture, and personal responsibility. Kraft's craft includes writing books and mentoring young people, something that is a passion and calling for him. Today we'll talk with Kraft about the challenges of being a cartoonist with a conscience. Then we'll wrap things up with some final thoughts about the severe NCAA sanctions levied on Penn State following the Jerry Sandusky child molestation trial. But first we'll lighten things up with the man behind the Mama's Boy cartoon, Jerry Kraft. We've been trying to get you on for about 6 months now. How you doing?
I'm good. Good to be here.
New York City, Washington Heights.
Absolutely.
So you had this gift since you were a kid. You grew up in New York, right? You always enjoyed drawing. How do you go from a kid in New York, growing up playing stoop ball, to having your career evolve into a syndicated cartoonist?
Because I loved it. I guess if I could have gotten a job playing stoop ball, I'd be doing that. Yeah. But you know, I just always loved to draw, and from the time I was, you know, yay big, I just always did it. My parents didn't know if I could actually make a living doing it, so.
Can you?
Yes, so
I see
far.
You're doing pretty good, right?
So far, you know.
You got the show.
I made it here, right? So the sky's the limit from now.
Once you hear, you're all set. The money starts rolling in after this, right?
Thank you. Remember that. So, but yeah, you know, I just always loved to do it, and to be able to do it, and not only to do books, but actually to show kids that they can do it now, because I do a lot of school visits and library visits. I have kids that, you know, they have their sketchbooks, and for the first time they're hearing, I can make money doing this? It's like, yeah, you actually can. You can move out of your parents' basement. I did.
How about the issue of reading? Your book gears with a lot of urban issues. A lot of urban kids aren't reading, don't necessarily engage in reading. Your book's about, one, being entrepreneurial, but also getting kids to enjoy reading. Talk about that.
Right. That's the big thing, because even in the book, I have Mom. She owns a bookstore, and she's raising her 2 teenage sons. So she's showing them, you know, how, you know, they're saying, oh, we don't like to read, and so she's getting them to read. So kids are reading about the importance of reading, not think that I'm actually talking to them. But I actually get a lot of schools and libraries get this for their reluctant readers, because it's done, you know, graphic novel style. So there's a lot of pictures, and they go through, but it's the old Fat Albert school. You remember how we grew up watching that? Where after you watch it, it's sunk in, you're like, hey, I just learned a lesson.
There, right.
Right, so I put a lot of that kind of stuff in.
So how do we gauge more of our urban kids with reading? Is it a matter of us not reaching them with stories, or what's the key to getting kids, urban kids in particular, engaged?
See, I think that's part of the problem. I think it's one of those, which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. Because I will talk to a lot of people in publishing, and they'll say there are not books geared towards African-American boys because they don't read. And then I'll talk to my kids. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and some of their friends, and they're like, we don't want to read Twilight.
Right, no books geared toward us.
Right.
Yeah, that's
fascinating.
fascinating.
We don't want to read, you know, some of these other books that they're making movies out of, and Hunger Games and stuff like that. That's not us. So it's up to me, and, you know, unfortunately, you know, I got to go into the bank account and, you know, literally put my money where my mouth is.
How so when you say that?
Because the Mama's Boys books I actually produce myself. I'm an indie publisher. I work with other people. This is a book, young adult novel, middle grade novel that I did with George C. Frazier and his sister Emma Frazier.
Who would have thunk it?
Right.
And so the storyline here is what? This is the first adventures of the
Frazier foster kids. It's 3 kids who grew up in the foster care system back in the 1960s. And now George Frazier is a well-known entrepreneur. He's been on Black Enterprise, he's on all kinds of places.
Power of networking is his.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's his brother and sister growing up in the foster care system. There were 11 children.
Interesting.
And the 2, you know, the older ones went off, and then 3 sets of 3 went to different foster care systems. And he wanted to tell his story.
And you know what, there's an audience for that too, for kids who've grown up that way and for kids who haven't, who want to learn more about that perspective.
Absolutely.
Now with your books, the Mama's Boys, what you're famous for, the Mama's Boys cartoons.
Right.
You grew up in New York with 2 parents,
I had 2 parents,
right?
Yes.
But your book is about two brothers who grew up in a single-family home with a grandma and an uncle.
Right. Right. They have an uncle and a grandfather.
Right.
Most of my friends, when I was coming up, had either the mom or the grandmother. I was one of the fortunate ones that had both my mom and dad at home. And
what difference did that make? Your friends are mostly growing up with single-parent homes. You had two parents, growing up in New York City. What difference did that make for you, you think, having a dad at home?
You know what? I did we all played stickball and did our own thing, but then I also did stuff with my dad, you know, so there's nothing quite like throwing the baseball for the first time. You know, a lot of stuff you can learn on the street on your own, but it's, to have a dad say, look, no, this is how you throw the ball. This is how you do this. And then just talking, going on trips and stuff, and then I'd have my friends, where you guys going? And then they would want to hang out. And sometimes, we'd have a car full of people. It'd be me and my dad and, 4 kids in the back.
All the fellas.
Right, all the fellas. And we'd be going somewhere.
Yeah.
And now that's the kind of dad I am. I had like 6 kids in my minivan the other day going to play basketball.
Now, did you appreciate at the time, did it take you getting older to appreciate, gee, this is the role that dad played? Or were you aware of it when you were that age, younger?
You know what? I never went through that awkward, I don't want to be around my dad stage. And I thank God for that, because I would have such I'd feel so bad now.
Were you ever guilty having a dad when your friends didn't have a dad?
No. I never look at myself to aspire to have less, the stuff that I'm fortunate to have.
You're grateful for.
I'm grateful for. But I don't say, oh, well, he's, struggling, so I wish I could struggle. No, if I could help you, so that's what I do with the kids, so that some of my friends, some of my kids' friends have. They're welcome to come in, and even Father's Day, I'll grab a couple of them, and we'll go do something just so that they get that bond and that interaction.
When did you know that, okay, I want to make this as my career? Because you weren't always doing cartooning, like you were doing other things. So walk us through when you say, you know what, that's it, let me try something else.
Well, I always wished I could do it.
Right.
I graduated from School of Visual Arts in New York, and I majored in advertising. And for the first probably 6 years, I worked at various ad agencies and writing body copy and radio commercials and TV commercials.
Were you bored, Steph?
I actually liked it. No,
okay.
I liked it because it was so creative. But what happened was, in the late 80s, early 90s, the ad business just imploded, And then all of a sudden I would go to apply for a job, and right behind me would be like my teacher from SBA. I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I actually...
career change, that, right?
Oh, absolutely. A woman named Barbara Slate was looking for an assistant, and I went and applied for the job and got it. And we did one of the first graphic novels that I had ever seen. I didn't even know what the graphic novel was. We did a series called Sweet 16 for Marvel. We did New Kids on the Block, which, my kids have no idea who they are. You'll know.
Yes, definitely.
So we did that kind of stuff. And then from there, I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. I got my name on some stuff. And I used that portfolio to get other stuff.
And what led you to Mama's Boy? What led you from that now to saying, okay, let me find a storyline to market? And we have about 30 seconds left. Okay. What we'll do is we'll maybe set it up by giving the names of the characters, and we'll go into segment 2, because we have about 30 seconds left. So the two main characters, the two boys in Mama's Boys are?
Tyrell and Yusuf. Tyrell is 18, Yusuf is 16. The younger one is bigger, a better athlete, and more outgoing. And the older one is more shy and reserved. And
that's a good tease. We'll come back and find out more about that, how the dynamics between those two boys and how they talk about life and what happens in their future. So don't go away. We talk about confidence building, family, culture with syndicated cartoonist Jerry Kraft. He's the man behind the popular Mama's Boys cartoon. You were watching the Stan Simpson Show. Catch us 24/7, ctnow.com/Stan. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Don't go away.